Alan Forsythe, 1961 to 1966. It's interesting thinking back to our time in Turkey and what was important to us and what we learned and all of the feelings that come back to me as I talk to you about this. We were only married a year and a half. And in fact, we were interviewed by the American Board on Mother's Day of 1961 and made the decision to go to Turkey. We were offered other places in the world and decided that Turkey sounded really exotic to us, and it's a place we always wanted to go. And we sailed from New York on August 15th. Now, I had never been to New York in my life before that, and we got on this ship that sailed across the ocean, took 2 weeks, and every day was 1 hour shorter. So by the time we got to Turkey, we were on Turkish time. I've never been so seasick in my life. I could not figure out why we were doing this at the time. And I remember arriving in Istanbul and 2 weeks there for orientation. And we were put on a train. I think it was the Doğu Express. It was an overnight train. Husbands and wives were not allowed to be in the same compartment. So I actually I roomed with Larry Manglitz on the train to Kayseri. And actually the train didn't go to Kayseri, it went to Karaköprü, which is outside Kayseri. And it was a shuttle train into the station in Kayseri. So we leaped off the train, and there was Jack Blake. And he said, "Get your stuff, come on, the other train's gonna leave." We got on the other train, went into Kayseri, got in a minivan, and were driven up to the school. Now, mind you, we'd come from the Midwest, and everything's green here, as you can tell. We got to Talas, and we walked over to the garden wall and looked out at the brownest field that I've ever seen in my life, because it was September. And we saw this little mountain beside us, and we were taken up to our apartment. We lived all 5 years up on the hill, which meant all the other families were down the hill. We were the only family up the hill. And I had the prep dorm for all 5 years, which was all the boys in 2 large rooms. I had the assistance of kids, abes, and the Turkish teachers were there. So I had close and intimate contact with every single new boy, some of whom we lost. The first time into Kayseri, they found a bus and went home. So we didn't keep everybody, but we kept nearly everybody. And I remember asking the older boys to teach me the swear words, because I wanted to know what the preps were saying to each other when they were shouting these words. I was school nurse for a couple years when we didn't have a nurse at the clinic. I coached basketball and soccer and volleyball. I ran a chemistry club. And to me, I was just the kid from coming out of Cleveland. I mean, I was about 23 years old. Carol was 21 maybe. And we had never been anywhere in our lives. I learned an awful lot. I got very used to the call to prayer because we could hear it from Talas 5 times a day. So, you know, we were brought up Christian. We were confronting a totally alien culture, a totally alien religion. And it was confronting us every day. Would I trade this experience for any other experience I have ever had my whole life? Not in a minute. 5 years was an incredibly long time. It was before the internet. I think we made 1 telephone call back to the States during that time. We lived on the European edition of Time magazine, which came on Friday nights, Friday afternoon. So all the teachers got together in a hammam and we read Time magazine. And when artichokes were in season, we got a crate of those and cooked them. But other than letters back and forth with home and friends here, we had absolutely no contact with this world here. We had no idea what was going on. When we came back, it was a very interesting experience because the world had changed on us. It's funny, I don't remember certain things that happened. I do remember that when I arrived, I kept a journal, and I wrote in it every day about what I experienced that day, because everything was so new and so different. And I read that journal recently, and I realized that by the end of October, I stopped writing, because everything was familiar. Our lives had become that life, and nothing ever stunned me again that I ever saw or heard. So I stopped writing a journal because there was no purpose to it. When we went back in 2007, which was the first time we had been back since 1966 when we left. Turkey was a different place. Everybody had a cell phone. There were super highways. When we were there, to get from Kayseri to Ankara was pretty much mostly a dirt road until you got to the main road between Ankara and Adana, on a very slow bus with very loud Turkish music playing for the whole time. Now we got in a car and we just zipped from Kayseri to Ankara. It was a different country, a really different place, and it was amazing what had happened to the country in those years. What was interesting to me is my Turkish came back instantly. As a matter of fact, sometimes I found myself saying something and somebody with us would say, how did you remember that? And I said, remember what? I sometimes didn't even realize I was responding to people in Turkish. We had pretty much lost contact with our kids and everybody until around 2001, 2002, when I got connected to the Yahoo group, the Talas 1889 group. And we got on that, and we get 3-4 emails a day about what's going on. And because of that, I was able to recontact students who we knew particularly while we were there. Dinners in Ankara and Kayseri and Izmir and Istanbul when we first went back were wonderful, because we reconnected with these men. They weren't boys any longer. And we were able to talk about our experiences. One of the funny things is Ali Peck said to me, he said, we figured you people made a lot of money, because why else would you come to Talas? He said, my family didn't want to live in Talas, and I certainly didn't. He said, you guys must have made a whole lot of money to be there. And I said, well, honestly, Ali, we were paid like a teacher on the Turkish economy. And we had to live on whatever that salary was. And we had to provide our own heat and, cook our own food and have a maid or a helper and pay them. So I said, we were not wealthy at all. And he just looked at me and he said, then why did you do it? And I said, I don't know. I said, at the time, we were young. We had no reason, no jobs that we were leaving. I had finished graduate school. We wanted to teach overseas, and we were offered different places, and we chose Turkey. And I said, we just did it. We did not think about it. We packed up, we got on a ship, we went to Turkey, got on a train, ended up at Talas, I said. But I said, I wouldn't have traded being with you people when you were young children growing up, and watching you for the 3 or 4 years that we might have had you while we were at the school. I said, we have no regrets about what we did. It was the best experience of my life. I learned a new culture. I learned a new language. I learned a lot about a new religion. And I said, all of those things have benefited us all through our lives. I said, that was 2007. When I went back to Turkey in 2011, it was because I was making a business contact there. I did Rotary Youth Exchange, and I was Turkish country contact for 15 years. So I brought Turkish children here, and I sent Americans to Turkey. I had a lot of contacts in Turkey, a lot of friends in Rotary that I knew, and so when we came back to Turkey, I was able to be in contact with those people. But I was president 2004-2005 of my Rotary Club, and I wanted to host a Turk during that year. So we chose a young lady from Iskenderun. And the irony is that we were not going to host her in our house. But her second host family fell through, and she came and lived with us. And I guess we connected on all kinds of levels. So when Bashar came back in 2011 to do an internship, which fell through, I kept her and had her work with me. And as a result, we started a business. So now we import Turkish olive oil and olive oil-based soaps from Antakya. This is totally unforeseen, but it goes back to going to Turkey in 1961. All those connections came full circle for what I'm doing now. Somebody asked me if I felt that during the time I was in Turkey, I could feel myself growing and changing. And my response to that is yes. Do I know all the ways? Not then, but I do now. And I understand what happened to us, how it changed, what the whole thing really meant in terms of our life back then, and even as we come to this point in our lives.